London, 1919. The city was still limping from the Great War. Its people haunted, its streets stained with the residue of grief. Hospitals overflowed not with the wounded, but with the forgotten. Men whose minds had been shattered by the trenches, women hollowed by mourning, children coughing in cold alleys where fathers would never return. Amid this ruin, one physician stood apart. He was neither a hero nor a madman, at least not at first. His name was Dr. Charles Bennett, a respected pathologist at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, known for his unnerving calm and his fascination with death. But beneath that calm, something was festering. His obsession had grown monstrous. Where others sought to heal the living, Bennett began to study the border between life and death, the silent instant when the soul departs the body. And as the world stumbled toward recovery, he pursued an experiment so horrifying, so blasphemous, that even his peers whispered of it in fear. One night in December 1919, inside a locked laboratory on Giltspur Street, Dr. Bennett injected himself with his own untested formula, a serum he claimed could resurrect the dead. What happened next became one of the most disturbing, unsolved mysteries in British medical history. This is not a ghost story. It is the story of a man who tried to play God, and may have succeeded. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and follow for more true stories of obsession, tragedy, and forgotten history. Every week, we bring you tales in the past that remind us how thin the line truly is between genius and madness. The guns had fallen silent, but the silence itself was unbearable. London in 1919 was a wounded animal, breathing but only barely. The once proud capital of empire now moved with a ghost's exhaustion. Streets that had once echoed with marching bands were now haunted by the dragging steps of limbless veterans. The air smelled of coal smoke and disinfectant, of cheap gin and rain on stone. Every face seemed older than it should be. Even the laughter of children felt borrowed, uncertain, as if joy itself no longer trusted the world. In the heart of this mournful city stood St. Bartholomew's Hospital, an ancient institution whose walls had seen centuries of suffering. Inside, the war's aftermath had taken on a new form. The wards overflowed not with soldiers, but with the aftermath of their survival. Men with trembling hands, vacant stares, or faces bound in gauze like relics of a vanished humanity. The nurses moved quietly, their white aprons stiff with starch and sorrow. At night, the corridors echoed with the muffled cries of patients reliving the trenches in their sleep. Among the doctors moving through this fog of despair was Dr. Charles Bennett, age 38, tall, gaunt, with a scholar's face and eyes that seemed to study everything and nothing at once. Before the war, he had been known for his skill as a battlefield surgeon, his hands fast, his judgment cold but precise. In France, he had saved hundreds, perhaps thousands, but every stitch, every heartbeat restored, had left something festering inside him. His colleagues said he returned from the front changed. They meant haunted. He rarely spoke of the war, but his journals tell another story. His handwriting grew restless after 1917. He began to write not about medicine, but about mortality. If life could be restarted, he wrote, then death is not an end. It is merely a pause. A system can fail, but a system can also be revived. These words were not written in triumph. They were written in grief. You see, Bennett's wife, Eleanor, had died in 1918, victim of the Spanish influenza that ravaged Europe after the war. He had returned home too late to save her. In his journals, he described finding her in their house on Finchley Road, her skin pale as porcelain, her breath already gone. The house was still warm, he wrote. Her tea was still steaming. That single moment seemed to break something deep inside him. From that day onward, his obsession with reversal consumed him, not resurrection as faith described it, but as chemistry, as science. In the months that followed, colleagues noticed his habits changing. He began working through the night, conducting autopsies long after the hospital had closed, requesting cadavers without proper authorization. The morgue attendants whispered that he was studying the last spark, the few moments after death when the body still twitched, when warmth had not yet faded from the flesh. He believed there was something there, a hidden current, an electrical whisper that could be reignited if only one could catch it in time. The war had made many men search for God. Bennett, instead, searched the machine behind him. By autumn, he was rarely seen outside the hospital. He stopped attending lectures, ignored patients, and spent more time in the pathology wing's basement than in his own office. Witnesses described hearing the crackle of machinery from behind the locked doors, the faint smell of ozone and formalin, and the rhythmic tapping of glass vials. When confronted, he dismissed the concerns with his usual calm. Progress demands discomfort, he would say. You mistake unease for danger. But there were rumors he was acquiring blood from a morgue without record, that he had bribed attendants to look the other way. One nurse, later interviewed anonymously, claimed she once saw him standing beside a shrouded body, whispering to it, his hands trembling not with fear, but excitement. London itself had grown accustomed to the strange after the war. Seances, mediums, spirit photographers, all had flourished in those grief-stricken years. The line between superstition and science had never been thinner. Yet Bennett's obsession was different. He did not seek comfort from ghosts. He sought control over death itself. By winter, the hospital board had begun to take notice. Dr. William Turner, his superior, confronted him over the missing specimens and the erratic behavior. Their exchange, later recorded in Turner's personal correspondence, was brief but chilling. Turner warned him that he was tampering with the sanctity of the human body. Bennett replied, "If the sanctity of the body ends at death, then sanctity is nothing but decay dressed as faith." After that, he was quietly reassigned to administrative duties, a polite way of forcing him out. But rather than leave, Bennett withdrew further into his private experiments. He rented a small flat near Smithfield Market, within walking distance of the hospital, and began importing laboratory equipment under false names. Neighbors recalled odd deliveries, crates arriving at midnight, the smell of carbolic acid leaking into the stairwell. Some nights they heard music playing faintly, an old phonograph tune drifting to the floorboards, interrupted by the clatter of glass and the hum of machinery. To those around him, he was simply another man broken by the war. But to those who knew him closely, those few colleagues who had seen his notes, his sketches, his calculations, there was a growing fear that Dr. Bennett was on the verge of something unspeakable. He had stopped searching for a cure. He was searching for a return. And somewhere in the deep recesses of that cold hospital, beneath the weight of its stone arches and flickering gas lamps, a new kind of horror was taking shape. One born not from malice, but from mourning. By early 1919, the walls of St. Bartholomew seemed to press inward, suffocating those who lingered after dark. The corridors took on a life of their own, their flickering gas lamps stretching shadows into strange shapes, the smell of disinfectant mingling with the deeper, metallic scent of blood. In the basement, among the endless shelves of preserved organs and labeled jars, Dr. Charles Bennett had carved out his refuge. Down there, beneath the murmuring hospital above, time itself seemed to dissolve. To the untrained eye, his laboratory was chaos. Beakers had clouded with residue. Copper wires ran like veins across the tables, and crude glass tubes pulsed faintly with light. But to Bennett, this was order, a map of the invisible. He called his project the Bennett process, though later historians would name it something else, the Resurrection Serum. The idea had begun with simple observation. He had noted that certain tissues, when deprived of oxygen, retained a faint electrical activity for minutes after death, not enough to sustain life, but enough to suggest that the machinery of existence didn't shut down instantly. It faltered, flickered, resisted extinction. He believed the key lay in restarting that falter, like coaxing a dying flame back to light. And so, he began experimenting with mixtures of adrenaline, alkaloids, and phosphorus stimulants, agents designed to awaken, to reanimate. But his methods were cruel. The first experiments were on rats. He would suffocate them, record the exact moment of death, and then inject his mixture directly into the heart. Some twitched, others convulsed, and a few, just a few, began to move again. They staggered, spasmed, and gasped for air, their bodies jerking like marionettes under an unseen hand. Bennett watched them not with horror, but with awe. They returned, he wrote in his logbook, not as they were, but not entirely gone. The boundary is thinner than we believe. Each small success only deepened his hunger. He began timing the intervals between death and revival, pushing the limits. 30 seconds, 2 minutes, then 5. He kept the revived specimens under observation, but what he found disturbed even him. Their hearts beat irregularly, their eyes clouded. They reacted to touch, but not to sound. Some tore at their cages until their flesh split. None lived beyond a day. He started calling them echoes. By spring, his fascination had turned into fever. He stopped sleeping, relying on morphine to dull the exhaustion. His once meticulous handwriting became erratic, filled with loops and violent underlines. He began recording strange thoughts, visions, even. When the heart stops, he wrote, the mind does not vanish. It lingers, circling like smoke without air. Then came the incident with the dog. One night, a porter at the hospital, a young man named Ellis, was startled by the sound of breaking glass in the pathology basement. When he entered, he found Bennett kneeling beside a lifeless terrier, its chest crudely stitched, its eyes glazed white. The doctor looked up, his hand shaking, blood smeared across his coat. It worked, he whispered, though the creature lay still. It was alive. For a moment, it was alive. The next morning, Ellis resigned. He told a matron that the doctor was playing with corpses. His statement was quietly buried. In those days, scandal could destroy reputations, and St. Bartholomew's would not risk public disgrace. But Bennett's descent could no longer be hidden. He began wearing gloves constantly, even in the wards. He avoided sunlight, complained of headaches, and hearing things others could not. Soft murmurs, whispers that came from nowhere. When a fellow physician, Dr. Alcott, attempted to intervene, Bennett turned on him with frightening intensity. "You think death is peace?" he snapped. "I have seen it. It is confusion. A system struggling to remember itself." It was not mere arrogance. It was grief metastasized into obsession. Each evening, after his official duties, he would slip into morgue with his notebook and syringe. London provided him with no shortage of test subjects. Soldiers who had succumbed to infection, victims of the influenza, nameless men, and women brought in from the streets. To Bennett, they were not bodies. They were thresholds. He recorded everything: the hour of death, the state of decay, the dose of serum administered. His handwriting trembled as he wrote, "If I can restore a heartbeat, can I restore a soul?" The hospital cleaners grew superstitious. They refused to go near the lower rooms after dark. They said there were lights flickering under the doors long after Bennett should have gone home. One claimed to have seen movement beneath a white shroud. Another swore she heard a low moaning, like a breath struggling to begin again. Bennett himself seemed unaware of the unease he caused. In his mind, he was no longer a physician. He was a pioneer standing at the edge of the unknown. His peers had their theories, their books, their lectures, but he had something greater, a purpose. He had loved, lost, and now he would conquer what had taken her from him. And yet, amid his feverish pursuit, a faint sliver of doubt began to creep into his notes. "If the body returns," he wrote in April, "will the mind? Does it follow, or must it be summoned?" His tone shifted from scientific precision to near prayer. "Eleanor, one page reads, 'Wait for me a little longer. I am close now.'" The man who once dissected corpses with detached grace now whispered to them. He was searching for her voice in the silence of the dead. By midsummer, the hospital board finally acted. He was placed on indefinite leave, his access to the laboratory revoked. But it was already too late. Bennett had moved his most sensitive equipment to a private workshop near Giltspur Street, claiming he needed quiet for theoretical work. No one questioned him further. And so, in the bowels of that dim little room, lit by a single flickering lamp and the red pulse of his strange machinery, Dr. Charles Bennett prepared to cross a line no man had crossed before. The war had shown him what death looked like, but now he intended to see what came after. The winter of 1919 came harsh and unkind, the kind that gnawed to the bones of London like an invisible sickness. Smoke coiled to the narrow alleys. Church bells tolled for the lost, and in a modest brick building off Giltspur Street, Dr. Charles Bennett began the final stage of his life's work. The hospital had cast him out, but that meant little now. He no longer needed their approval. He had his own laboratory, his own specimens, and the silence he craved. The room was a crypt disguised as a workspace. Glass flasks lined the walls like organs preserved in glass. The air reeked of ether and scorched metal, heavy with the bitter tang of electricity. In the corner stood a steel operating table, its surface cold and immaculate, flanked by medical instruments gleaming faintly under the weak light of an oil lamp. Every object in that room had a purpose, and every purpose led to one goal: to reverse what God and nature had decreed irreversible. His serum was no longer a single concoction, but a living formula, evolving with every failed trial. He called it Compound Number 12. The mixture shimmered faintly when agitated, a bluish, phosphorescent glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its ingredients were a dangerous blend of organic extracts, stimulants, and unstable compounds, some derived from the very tissues of the dead he studied. Bennett believed that by combining biochemical energy with electrical reactivation, he could not only restart the heart, but reignite consciousness itself. The formula's earliest notes were clinical, almost methodical, but as the months progressed, his writing changed. The neat cursive became jagged, frantic, desperate. "It hears," he wrote one night in a trembling scrawl. "It responds. The compound grows warm when near flesh, almost aware." He began using animal subjects again, refining his techniques with precision bordering on ritual. Each experiment began the same way. A subject was anesthetized, its pulse monitored, its breath measured. Then came the cessation, the stillness. Bennett would wait, stopwatch in hand, watching for a precise moment when the spark of life flickered out. Then, with a slow and reverent motion, he would inject the serum. Electricity followed, short, precise bursts delivered through copper contacts at the temples and chest. At first, nothing. Then the twitching began. A convulsion, a gasp, and sometimes a cry. It was not a sound of pain, but confusion. Something ancient and wordless, dragged unwillingly back from silence. Bennett's notes from those nights read like scripture. Movement, pulse restored. Irregular, the body resists death. The barrier can be broken. But the revived creatures, those poor, ruined things, were never the same. Their eyes reflected no recognition. Their bodies trembled even when still. Some turned violent, snapping at unseen threats, tearing at their own skin until restrained. Others lay motionless, breathing shallowly for hours before collapsing again into true death. Each success became its own nightmare. Yet Bennett persisted. Failure no longer meant fear. It meant refinement. He stopped eating regularly. He no longer left his laboratory except to collect supplies or the occasional body from the hospital morgue, which he obtained through bribery and silence. The attendants thought him deranged but harmless. They did not see what he carried in those covered crates, the forms of the nameless and unclaimed. One night, he wrote a letter to his deceased wife. It was never sent, of course, but it survived among his papers. "Eleanor, I am close. I feel in my bones when the serum touches life. Something stirs beneath the skin, something familiar. You will forgive me when you see it work. Death will not hold you. I promise you that." There was love in that madness, though twisted beyond recognition. Then came his first human test. The records do not say whose body it was, only that it arrived from the hospital under private authorization. The experiment was conducted in secrecy. The door bolted from within. His notes described it clinically at first: body temperature, pulse delay, serum dosage. Then a single phrase stands out, underlined twice: eyes opened. What followed was chaos. The revived subject convulsed, tearing at its restraints. Its chest heaved, its fingers clawing the air, its mouth moving soundlessly as if trying to form words. Bennett recorded that its pupils reacted to light, that its limbs responded to commands, briefly. Then, after 7 minutes, the subject collapsed. Pulse gone. Silence returned. But Bennett did not mourn the failure. He celebrated it. 7 minutes of stolen life. That was proof enough. Proof that the boundary had cracked. He sat for hours beside the still body, staring into its pale face, whispering apologies, prayers, perhaps even her name. The candlelight flickered across his tired eyes as he wrote the last line of the night's entry. Death is not absolute. It is only waiting to be told otherwise. After that night, something in Dr. Charles Bennett shifted. He no longer doubted the possibility of a serum, only its refinement. He had seen death bend, if only for a moment. 7 minutes of motion, breath, and awareness. 7 minutes where nature's most immutable law had wavered. To him, it was not horror, it was revelation. He grew obsessed with perfecting the interval between death and revival. Timing, he believed, was everything. Wait too long, and the mind slipped beyond recall. Act too soon, and the serum disrupted the body's delicate balance. There's a precise second, he wrote, a hinge upon which eternity swings. He began to call this critical point the threshold. Every night, he returned to that steel table with renewed purpose. He adjusted dosages, modified the voltage, introduced stabilizers to prevent neural collapse. The results varied. Some bodies revived for seconds, others for minutes. A few, disturbingly, showed signs of cognitive response. Eyes following movement, muscles tightening as if in fear. But never speech, never thought. Whatever flickered he summoned was primal, instinctive, life in its rawest, most desperate form. His journal entries grew darker. It is not resurrection, he confessed. It is recall, like calling something from a deep sleep, but the sleeper does not know its own name. Sleep eluded him completely. The more he worked, the more the line between the living and the dead blurred. He began to see motion where there was none, a twitch in a limb, a breath that wasn't there. He spoke aloud to his subjects, asking them questions, pleading for a sign that something of the person remained. "Do you remember?" He would whisper, "Do you hear me?" The responses were silence, and yet he swore the air itself seemed to hum. Neighbors began to complain of strange noises from his flat. Electrical crackles, the hiss of pressure valves, sometimes even a faint rhythmic thudding like a heartbeat. One claimed to have seen him through the window, standing before a shrouded figure, his hands trembling as if in prayer. When the police came to inquire, he smiled politely, assured them it was medical research, and the matter was dropped. After all, who would challenge a man once decorated for his wartime service? Still, isolation deepened his madness. Food spoiled untouched on his table. His reflection startled him. He claimed his skin was growing pale from lack of sunlight, that his pulse sometimes felt slow, as though he himself were slipping toward the threshold. "The serum calls to me," he wrote. It asked for completion. He began testing trace doses on himself, microscopic injections designed to fortify cellular response. At first, the effects were mild: sleeplessness, heightened alertness, a strange metallic taste on his tongue. But soon came hallucinations. He heard Eleanor's voice in the hum of his equipment, soft and pleading. Sometimes in the half-light, he thought he saw her, standing in the doorway, eyes hollow but smiling. On the evening of December 14th, his journal recorded something chilling. "The serum is ready, not for others, for me. The only way to know its truth is to cross the threshold myself." Those would be the last words he ever wrote in full clarity. December 17th, 1919. The night London seemed to hold its breath. A thin frost clung to the streets, muting the sound of hooves and footsteps, while fog rolled low along the rooftops like smoke from a dying fire. In a narrow lane near Smithfield Market, one window burned faintly through the mist, the window of Dr. Charles Bennett's laboratory. Inside, the man who had spent years dissecting death prepared to meet it on his own terms. His notes from earlier that day were brief, almost attached. All trials complete, compound stable, heart current to be applied within 30 seconds post-mortem. Objective, self-resuscitation. There was no mention of fear, no hesitation, only the calm of a man convinced that what he was about to do would rewrite the laws of life itself. The room was immaculate, instruments aligned, vials arranged in rows like soldiers awaiting orders. The serum, compound number 13, sat in a crystal vial at the center of the table, faintly glowing under the lamp's trembling light. Around it, coils of copper wire connected to a modified generator. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic, and beneath it all, the metallic tang of blood that never quite left the walls. He began with ritualistic precision, checked his pulse, steady, injected a mild sedative to steady his nerves. He stripped to his undershirt, exposing the thin frame of a man eaten by sleepless nights. Then, with deliberate slowness, he prepared 2 syringes, one filled with a serum, the other with a paralytic agent designed to induce temporary death by halting the heart. He wrote a single sentence on a scrap of paper before proceeding. "If I succeed, humanity will never die again." At 11:43 p.m., he sat on the steel table, positioned the syringe, and pressed the plunger. Within moments, his breathing slowed. His heartbeat weakened. He counted silently, 5 beats, then 4, then 2, and finally none. His body went still. The clock on the wall ticked on. 1 minute passed. 2. The light in the room flickered as the generator hummed to life. Then, as planned, the serum entered his veins. The first jolt was electric. Literally, his machine delivered a shock strong enough to make the corpse twitch violently. A second, more measured pulse followed. Then a third. At 11:51, the impossible happened. His hand moved. The laboratory log recovered later would note this moment with sterile simplicity. Subject shows autonomic response. Eyes open. But witnesses, those few who arrived later, told a different story. Neighbors claimed they heard a scream. Not of pain, but of something primal and unfathomable. Lights flickered across the building. A window shattered. The sound, one woman recalled, wasn't human at all. It was like something being born wrong. Inside that sealed room, Dr. Charles Bennett gasped back to life, if one could call it life. His heart pounded unevenly, his body convulsing as if rejecting its own return. His eyes, bloodshot and unblinking, darted wildly across the room. He tried to speak, but the words tangled into gurgles. His skin turned ashen, veins dark beneath the surface, pulsing with something not entirely natural. The machine sparked once more, and then silence. When the constable arrived hours later, called by neighbors disturbed by the noise, he found the door locked from the inside. The air inside was acrid and heavy. The machine still hummed faintly. The wires blackened, and on the table lay Bennett's body, pale, motionless, but with his eyes wide open, staring toward the ceiling as if still waiting for an answer. The official police report described it as a scene of accidental electrocution, though those who entered that laboratory that morning would never again speak of it easily. The door had been forced open by a constable named Henry Mills, a young officer barely 22, who had expected to find nothing more than a broken generator or spilled chemicals. What he found instead haunted him for the rest of his days. The air inside was thick, suffocating, an unnatural heat that made his skin prickle. The smell was worse, burnt copper, formalin, and something else beneath it, something organic and foul. The single lamp still flickered, throwing wild shadows across the walls. Instruments were scattered on the floor, glass shattered, wires tangled like veins torn from the earth. And in the center of it all lay Dr. Charles Bennett, his body twisted, eyes open and bloodshot, mouth frozen in a silent half-smile. Mills approached cautiously, noting the strange stains on the doctor's shirt, dark blue, almost iridescent, as if the serum itself had bled through him. He checked for a pulse. None. But as his hand touched the corpse, he recoiled violently. The body was warm, too warm. The constable swore under his breath, stumbling back, calling for help. When others arrived, 2 orderlies from the hospital and a physician, they found the same thing. The body was dead, yet skin retained the flush of life. A faint current of heat seemed to radiate from within. One of the men claimed he saw Bennett's fingers twitch when they moved him. Another said he heard a sound, a faint whisper from the doctor's lips, though no one could agree on what was said. By dawn, the hospital administrators had taken control of the scene. His notes were seized, his machines dismantled, and the police were ordered to make no public statement. The official explanation, an experiment gone tragically wrong, was enough to quiet the newspapers. But inside St. Bartholomew's, the story spread like plague. Nurses whispered that his body had refused to cool. The morgue attendants, shaken and pale, said the lights flickered whenever they walked past his drawer. 3 days later, when they came to prepare his body for burial, they found it in an impossible state. There was no stiffness, no pallor of death. The skin retained its elasticity, the lips slightly parted as though mid-breath. Dr. Turner, who had once been his mentor, oversaw the examination. His written testimony would later vanish from hospital records, but one page survived in private hands. Subject Bennett exhibits no visible decay, pupils dilated, temperature abnormally high, for duration postmortem. Electrical discharge observed when contact made with skin. Recommend immediate burial to prevent further disturbance. But Bennett was not buried, at least not immediately. The board delayed the process, citing scientific investigation. During that time, something strange occurred. A night watchman swore he saw a movement behind the frosted glass of the morgue door, shadows shifting where none should have been. Others heard faint scraping sounds from inside the storage vault. Then, on December 23rd, when an attendant opened drawer 17 to retrieve the body for embalming, the drawer was empty. The sheets remained. The identification tag, Mark Bennett, Charles, deceased, still hung from a rail. But the body was gone. No forced entry. No broken locks. Just silence and the lingering scent of ozone, faint but unmistakable. From that day, the legend of Dr. Bennett's resurrection began to take root in London's underbelly. Some called it a hoax, others a miracle, but those who had seen his body knew better. Whatever he had done that night had worked. Perhaps not as he intended, but enough to tear a hole in nature's order. And in that hole, something had stepped through. The scandal that followed the Bethnal Green sighting could no longer be buried beneath official denials. The whispers became an infection, spreading through drawing rooms, newspaper presses, and the candlelit corners of London's taverns. The dead physician walks. One headline read before it was hastily recalled from print. Yet hundreds of copies had already found their way into the hands of a fearful public. St. Bartholomew's became the epicenter of unease. Reporters crowded outside its iron gates, demanding answers. Inside, the remaining doctors avoided one another's eyes, pretending not to notice the missing records, the altered death certificates, or the faint hum that still emanated from the lower wing, where Bennett's machines had once stood. Some nights, janitors swore they heard those machines stirring again, powered by nothing but darkness and memory. Lord Ravenscroft's inquiry had shifted from concealment to containment. He summoned every surviving assistant, every clerk who had handled Bennett's work, and subjected them to interrogation in a dim chamber beneath the Royal College of Physicians. The questions were always the same. What did he create? Did he succeed? Did you see him afterward? Most answered no and were dismissed. But a few spoke hesitantly of the blue serum, how it pulsed faintly in the vial as if alive. One swore that Bennett's final formula had used human spinal tissue, procured from an unnamed source. Another claimed that Bennett's war injury, long thought healed, had in fact left him with an implanted steel fragment, one that might have conducted the electrical surge through his body differently that night. When that testimony reached the board, the inquiry was abruptly closed. Official documents were burned. Witnesses vanished. Even Ravenscroft himself resigned and left England for Switzerland, muttering about the boundary between spark and soul. But the scandal refused to die. In March of 1920, a grave was quietly dug in Highgate Cemetery. The coffin bore Bennett's name, though few attended the burial, and none were permitted to see inside. A sealed report claimed that the remains were recovered, though it provided no explanation as to where or how they had been found. The grave digger, an old man named Wilkes, later confessed that when he lowered the coffin, it felt strangely light, as though empty. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, the story vanished. Newspapers moved on to fresher tragedies. The strikes, the influenza dead, the crumbling of empires. St. Bartholomew's rebuilt its lower wing. The public forgot, but the doctors did not. Years later, long after the last of the inquiry's members had died, a new physician stumbled upon a locked cabinet in the hospital's basement. Inside were Bennett's old instruments, rusted, yes, but still faintly resonant to the touch, humming like trapped breath. And in a small glass jar, sealed tight with wax, floated a cloudy blue liquid that glimmered faintly when held to the light. The label had faded, but two words remained, written in Bennett's precise hand. Phase 2 human trial. The scandal that followed the Bethnal Green sighting could no longer be buried beneath official denials. The whispers became an infection, spreading through drawing rooms, newspaper presses, and the candlelit corners of London's taverns. "The dead physician walks," one headline read before it was hastily recalled from print. Yet hundreds of copies had already found their way into the hands of a fearful public. St. Bartholomew's became the epicenter of unease. Reporters crowded outside its iron gates, demanding answers. Inside, the remaining doctors avoided one another's eyes, pretending not to notice the missing records, the altered death certificates, or the faint hum that still emanated from the lower wing, where Bennett's machines had once stood. Some nights, janitors swore they heard those machines stirring again, powered by nothing but darkness and memory. Lord Ravenscroft's inquiry had shifted from concealment to containment. He summoned every surviving assistant, every clerk who had handled Bennett's work, and subjected them to interrogation in a dim chamber beneath the Royal College of Physicians. The questions were always the same. What did he create? Did he succeed? Did you see him afterward? Most answered no and were dismissed. But a few spoke hesitantly of the blue serum, how it pulsed faintly in the vial as if alive. One swore that Bennett's final formula had used human spinal tissue, procured from an unnamed source. Another claimed that Bennett's war injury, long thought healed, had in fact left him with an implanted steel fragment, one that might have conducted the electrical surge through his body differently that night. When that testimony reached the board, the inquiry was abruptly closed. Official documents were burned. Witnesses vanished. Even Ravenscroft himself resigned and left England for Switzerland, muttering about the boundary between spark and soul. But the scandal refused to die. In March of 1920, a grave was quietly dug in Highgate Cemetery. The coffin bore Bennett's name, though few attended the burial, and none were permitted to see inside. A sealed report claimed that the remains were recovered, though it provided no explanation as to where or how they had been found. The gravedigger, an old man named Wilkes, later confessed that when he lowered the coffin, it felt strangely light, as though empty. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, the story vanished. Newspapers moved on to fresher tragedies. The strikes, the influenza dead, the crumbling of empires. St. Bartholomew's rebuilt its lower wing. The public forgot, but the doctors did not. Years later, long after the last of the inquiry's members had died, a new physician stumbled upon a locked cabinet in the hospital's basement. Inside were Bennett's old instruments, rusted, yes, but still faintly resonant to the touch, humming like trapped breath. And in a small glass jar, sealed tight with wax, floated a cloudy blue liquid that glimmered faintly when held to the light. The label had faded, but two words remained, written in Bennett's precise hand. Phase 2 human trial. By the time a generation had passed, Dr. Charles Bennett had become less a man and more a ghost whisperer in the corridors of medical schools. A cautionary myth told to warn ambitious students of the price of defying mortality. Yet beneath the academic disdain lay something else. Fascination, the missing body, the empty coffin, the sealed reports. These were not the ingredients of a simple tragedy. They were evidence of something unresolved, something that refused to rest. In 1947, a historian named Arthur Delaney began to collect what remained of Bennett's scattered notes. A quiet man with a limp and a love for lost stories, Delaney had served as a field medic during the Second World War. He'd seen death up close, too close, and the rumors of a serum that could reverse it drew him like a moth to flame. He wrote letters to St. Bartholomew's, to the Ministry of Health, even to the families of Bennett's former assistants. Most never replied. Those who did urged him to leave the matter buried. There are reasons, one wrote, why that name is not spoken in London. But Delaney persisted. In an abandoned storage room beneath the Royal College of Surgeons, he found a small chest sealed in wax and wrapped in a decayed Union Jack. Inside were fragments of glass vials, pages soaked in what appeared to be old formalin, and a single preserved specimen, a small section of human tissue, threaded through with faint metallic filaments. The attached note read simply, result incomplete, subject not stable. The discovery consumed him. Delaney began cross-referencing hospital records, locating gaps where entire files had been erased. He traced the disappearance of staff members who had once worked under Bennett. Nurses, orderlies, laboratory aides. Many had died mysteriously, their deaths attributed to electrical accidents or unknown contagion. Others had emigrated and vanished entirely. Then came the pattern that chilled him to the bone. From 1920 onward, there had been a series of medical anomalies. Cases of patients declared clinically dead who revived hours later, though with severe neurological decay. Most occurred within a 5-mile radius of St. Bartholomew's. One patient, when questioned after his revival, could only repeat a single phrase in a hoarse, mechanical whisper. The doctor said I would wake. Delaney's obsession deepened into paranoia. He began keeping journals filled with sketches of human nervous systems entwined with circuitry, writing theories of bioelectric persistence and synthetic soul transference. He believed Bennett's formula had survived, perhaps replicated, perhaps evolving on its own. And then, one night in November 1949, he vanished from his home. The only thing left behind was his open notebook, a single sentence written in trembling ink. I have found him. He does not age. He does not breathe, but he remembers me. When police entered the study, they noted a faint chemical odor in the air, ozone and formalin, the same scent that had haunted Bennett's laboratory 3 decades earlier. The window was open, curtains stirring in the cold London wind. On the sill lay fingerprints, one set old, deep, scorched into the paint as if by heat. And in the empty chair by the desk, the cushion was still warm. By the dawn of the 1960s, Dr. Charles Bennett's name had become a ghost footnote in the archives of science, a figure dismissed by official historians as a delusional wartime eccentric. But outside the walls of academia, his legend endured. Occult circles in London's East End spoke of a blue elixir capable of halting death itself. Black market collectors whispered that fragments of Bennett's research had surfaced in post-war Berlin, traded for diamonds and morphine. Some claimed the Soviets had reconstructed parts of his formula, merging it with their own studies on reanimation. None of it could be proven. Yet every decade, a new witness seemed to emerge. Someone who swore they had seen the doctor. The sightings were always the same. A man tall and gaunt, wearing a dark overcoat, eyes faintly luminescent in the dark. He never spoke, never lingered. He appeared in graveyards, hospitals, or battlefields, anywhere the air stank of death. Then he would vanish, and those who saw him often fell ill soon after, feverish and trembling, as though some invisible current had passed through them. One such case was that of Dr. Eleanor Harcourt, a neurologist who, in 1963, was assigned to catalog St. Bartholomew's remaining pre-war records. In a sealed envelope marked property of the Crown, she discovered an unlabeled glass vial containing a thick blue residue, the same hue described in the missing Bennett files. Against instruction, she kept it. Within weeks, colleagues reported that she had grown pale and withdrawn, her voice unsteady, her eyes unnaturally bright under light. Then one morning, she failed to arrive for work. When police entered her flat, they found the vial shattered on the floor and the room stinking of ozone. On her desk lay a single note, written hastily across a patient chart. He spoke to me through the current. He said the serum is not medicine. It is memory. After Harcourt's disappearance, the government intervened once again. All remaining Bennett materials were confiscated under new classification laws, and a quiet order was issued to destroy contaminated relics from his era. Yet the purge came too late. Pieces of his work had already scattered, replicated, copied, mythologized. Experimental neurologists in Prague claimed to have derived theories of post-neural continuity from Bennett's legacy. In America, whispers circulated about clandestine research into suspended animation, and in England, power flickered nightly in the old neighborhoods where his lab had once stood, as if the grid itself remembered him. By the close of the century, Bennett's story had become a tragic parable told to young scientists, a man so consumed by his desire to conquer death that he became something neither living nor dead. But there were those who still searched for him. Among them, an aging constable named Henry Mills, long thought insane, who in his final letter to the London Gazette wrote, "He has been seen again. The same eyes, the same coat. He walks among us still. He is not a ghost, nor a man. He is the proof that we have gone too far." No grave bears his true remains. No record confirms his death. Yet on cold nights in London's forgotten quarters, when lightning cracks across the sky, some swear the air tastes faintly of copper, and that, somewhere in the dark, a pulse begins to beat again.